defining religion and the philosophy of religion. What distinguishes philosophy of religion from theology or religious studies? The nature and functions of religious belief. What is religion? No single definition commands universal assent, partly because religious traditions vary widely in doctrine, practice, and self-understanding. Still, many scholars converge on a family resemblance. Religions typically involve 1. Symbols, narratives, and rituals. 2. Communities and institutions. 3. Beliefs and practices oriented toward an ultimate reality, God, gods, Brahman, Śūnyatā, emptiness, the Tao, or an ultimate concern, salvation, nirvana, liberation, and 4. Moral and ascetical disciplines shaping life toward that end. Crucially, not all religions are theistic. Classical Theravada Buddhism and much of Daoism lack a creator god yet are uncontroversially religions. Philosophy of religion versus theology versus religious studies. Philosophy of religion uses the methods of philosophy, conceptual analysis, argument, phenomenology, logic, and ethics to evaluate religious claims and practices. It asks, for example, whether belief in God is justified, whether miracles are possible, how divine omniscience relates to human freedom, what emptiness means in Madhyamaka Buddhism, or whether mystical experience can confer knowledge. The discipline is not committed to any tradition. It is a second-order critical inquiry that can be practiced by believers, agnostics, and atheists alike. Theology, from theos plus logos, is reasoning from within a tradition, faith-seeking understanding in Anselm's phrase. It presupposes certain revelations, scriptures, or authorities and elaborates them systematically. Christian Trinitarian theology, Islamic Kalam or Mimamsa hermeneutics in Hinduism are paradigms. Theology can be philosophically sophisticated, but its evidential standards include sources the philosopher qua philosopher may not grant, e.g. Scripture's authority. Religious studies is an academic, typically empirical field that investigates religion descriptively and comparatively. History of religions, anthropology, sociology, and psychology of religion. It asks how rituals bind communities, Durkheim, how conversion happens, James, or how religions spread and change without adjudicating truth claims as such. Epistemic postures. Philosophy of religion ranges from apologetic, defending a view, to critical, testing coherence, to comparative, mapping concepts across traditions. It also spans analytic and continental styles, virtue and feminist approaches, and increasingly cross-cultural philosophy that engages Sanskrit, Pali, Chinese, Arabic, and classical Greek sources directly. The nature of religious belief. Religious belief is often propositional. God exists. All conditioned things are impermanent, but is also fiduciary, trust, practical commitment to live under a norm, and affective, a stance of reverence, gratitude, or awe. In Christian thought, a classic distinction is between fides quae creditur, what is believed, and fides qua creditur, the act or virtue of believing. In Buddhism, shraddha/sada is confidence that catalyzes practice. Its rationality is tested by the transformation it yields, e.g., reduction of greed, hatred, and delusion, not only by argument. Confucianism treats belief less as assent to metaphysics and more as ritualized habituation, le, cultivating ren, humaneness. Functions and social roles. Cognitive, religious worldviews interpret ultimate questions, origin, destiny, meaning, evil, death. Moral, they ground and sustain norms, e.g. ahimsa in Jainism, charity and zakat in Islam. Formative, practices shape character, attention, and desire, prayer, meditation, asceticism. Communal, rituals mark belonging and transmit memory. Aesthetic/affective, liturgy, architecture, and art form sensibilities of awe and gratitude. Political, religions can underwrite regimes or galvanize reform, liberation theology, Gandhian nonviolence. Philosophy of religion scrutinizes these functions and asks whether they support or distort the truth aim of religious life, rationality and pluralism. The field wrestles with whether rationality in religion is evidentialist, belief needs propositional evidence, reformed epistemology, some beliefs are properly basic, pragmatist, truth is what best resolves lived problems, or phenomenological, begin from the way the sacred is given. In a plural world, philosophers also ask how mutually incompatible claims can be responsibly negotiated via exclusivism, inclusivism, or pluralism, and whether different traditions aim at the same ultimate reality under different conceptual schemes or at genuinely different ultimates. Further reading, Ninian Smart, The World's Religions and Dimensions of the Sacred, Paul Tillich, Dynamics of Faith, William Alston, Perceiving God on Religious Belief as a Doxastic Practice, John Hick, An Interpretation of Religion, J. L. Schellenberg, Prolegomena to a Philosophy of Religion, Robert Audi, Rationality and Religious Commitment, S. N. Balagangadhara, The Heathen in His Blindness, on the Concept of Religion Cross-Culturally, S. Radhakrishnan and C. A. Moore, A Sourcebook in Indian Philosophy. 2. Arguments for the Existence of God. Classical arguments, ontological, cosmological, and teleological. Modern reformulations and critiques, ontological arguments. Anselm's Proslogion reasoned, by definition, God is that than which nothing greater can be conceived. If God existed only in the understanding, a greater being, one existing in reality, could be conceived. Hence God exists. Kant famously objected that existence is not a predicate that adds greatness. Modern modal versions, Plantinga, define God as a maximally great being, omnipotent, omniscient, morally perfect across all possible worlds. If it's possible such a being exists, then there is a possible world in which God exists, but a necessarily existent being, if possible, exists in every world, hence in ours. Critics press whether the key premise, possibility of a maximally great being, is any less contentious than the conclusion, and whether modal ontological arguments risk modal collapse, erasing contingency, or support parodies. Necessarily existing perfect island is incoherent, but debates continue about whether the parodies really parallel the divine case. Cosmological arguments. Aquinas's ways from motion, causation, contingency, and Leibniz's version from the principle of sufficient reason, PSR, argue from the existence of contingent beings to a necessary being that explains why anything exists. A currently discussed variant is the Kalam cosmological argument. 1. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. 2. The universe began to exist. Therefore, 3. The universe has a cause beyond itself, often identified as a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, immensely powerful personal agent. Defenders argue that an actual infinite of past events is impossible and cite cosmology suggesting a temporal beginning. Critics question 1. Whether the PSR is self-evident. 2. Whether an infinite regress is absurd. 3. Whether beginningless cosmologies or quantum models evade the premises. And 4. Whether the cause must be a personal God rather than a non-personal necessary reality. Teleological design arguments. Traditional versions, Paley, infer a designer from the adaptation of organisms. Darwinian evolution eroded this form by explaining complexity through natural selection. Contemporary design arguments pivot to cosmic fine-tuning. Many physical constants appear to fall in a very narrow life-permitting range. This is striking if unguided, but less surprising if a cosmic mind aims at life. Some frame it as an inference to the best explanation. Others use Bayesian confirmation. Objections include the multiverse hypothesis. Many universes make a life-friendly one unsurprising. Selection effects. Observers will of course find themselves in a universe that permits them. And the worry that fine-tuning assumes life like ours is the aim. Proponents reply that multiverse theories face their own evidential burdens, and that life's generality, not carbon chauvinism, is what calls for explanation, cumulative case, and pragmatic reasons. Many philosophers, Swinburne, Collins, argue for a cumulative case in which cosmological, axiological, objective moral values, experiential, mystical experience, and historical, putative miracles, strands together raise theism's probability. Others, Pascal James, emphasize the permissibility or prudence of faith where strict proof is unavailable given the existential stakes. Further reading. Anselm, Proslogion, Kant, Critique of Pure Reason, Paralogisms, Antinomies, Gottfried Leibniz, Monadology, Samuel Clarke, A Demonstration of the Being and Attributes of God. William Lane Craig and J. P. Morland, editors, The Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology. Robert Merrihew Adams, Finite and Infinite Goods, Axiological Arguments. Robin Collins, The Teleological Argument, various essays. Graham Oppy, Arguing About Gods, Richard Swinburne, The Existence of God, John Leslie and Robert Lawrence Kuhn, editors, The Mystery of Existence, Fine-Tuning Debates. 3. Arguments against the existence of God, Logical and Evidential Problem of Evil, Divine Hiddenness and the Argument from Unbelief, Logical Problem of Evil. J. L. Mackie argued that the propositions God is omnipotent, God is wholly good, and evil exists are logically inconsistent. Alvin Plantinga's Free Will Defense replies, if God creates significantly free creatures, it may be impossible. Not even God can do the logically impossible to ensure they never do wrong. Plantinga showed a logical possibility under which God and evil coexist without contradiction. Most philosophers accept that the strict logical problem is diffused. The harder question is evidential. Evidential/inductive problem of evil. William Rowe's famous fawn case. A fawn dies horribly in a forest fire with no apparent compensating good. He argues such seemingly gratuitous evils make God's existence unlikely. Responses include 1. Theodicies, see section 6, that specify goods served by evil. 2. Skeptical theism, which claims human cognitive limits prevent us from inferring gratuitousness from appears gratuitous. And 3. Appeals to afterlife or cosmic eschatology, Hicks' soul-making. Divine hiddenness. J. L. Schellenberg formulates, if a perfectly loving God exists, then for any finite person capable of relationship, God would make his existence evident enough to permit relationship, absent resistance. Yet there are non-resistant non-believers. Therefore, such a God likely does not exist. Replies. A. Free and non-coercive relationship might require a space for seeking, not overwhelming manifestation. B. Hiddenness may protect human moral autonomy or communal goods. No theocracy of spectacle. C. Some argue there are no truly non-resistant unbelievers. D. Others propose that God reveals differently across cultures and life stages. Or E. That God's love may wait until the right conditions, including post-mortem opportunities, to reveal. Other critiques: incoherence arguments, omnipotence paradoxes, a stone too heavy to lift, are usually handled by clarifying omnipotence as power to do all that is logically possible. Divine command and morality. Some contend objective moral facts are either independent of God, making God redundant, or dependent, risking arbitrariness. Theists respond with modified divine command theories or natural law accounts where God's nature grounds value. Naturalism's parsimony. If the world is explainable by impersonal laws and chance, adding God violates Occam's razor. Theists reply that explanation of why there are laws at all, or why consciousness and value exist, may not be captured by naturalism. Further reading: J. L. Mackie, The Miracle of Theism. William Rowe, The Problem of Evil and Some Varieties of Atheism. J. L. Schellenberg, Divine Hiddenness and Human Reason. Michael Bergman, Skeptical Theism. Paul Draper, Pain and Pleasure, An Evidential Problem for Theists. Peter van Inwagen, The Problem of Evil. Eric Wielenberg, Robust Ethics, Morality Without God. Stephen Law, The Evil God Challenge. 4. Religious Experience. Mysticism, Revelation, and Altered States of Consciousness. William James, Rudolf Otto, and Contemporary Critiques. Phenomenology. Mystical experience displays recurring features across cultures. William James' classic 4 marks: ineffability, noetic quality, a sense of insight, transiency, and passivity, map well onto reports from Christian contemplatives, Sufi Dhikr, Kashmiri Shaiva Samadhi, and Zen Kensho. Rudolf Otto analyzed the numinous, the mysterium tremendum et fascinans, a felt encounter with the holy as simultaneously overwhelming and attractive. Contemporary studies distinguish introvertive mysticism, undifferentiated unity, Advaitas nirvikalpa samadhi, from extrovertive unity through multiplicity, nature mysticism. Pilgrims report thick experiences of presence in liturgy or sacrament. Many traditions hold canonical revelations, Torah, Quran, Vedas, believed to be divinely authored or mediated. Epistemic status. Can such experiences justify belief? Richard Swinburne proposes a principle of credulity. It seems to S that X is present is prima facie evidence unless defeaters are shown, and testimony, others' sincere reports carry weight. William Alston describes doxastic practices. If sense perception and memory are rational absent specific defeaters, perhaps disciplined mystical perception is similarly innocent until proven guilty. Critics offer 1. Naturalistic explanations, neural correlates, suggestion, psychosocial need. 2. Constructivism, Stephen Katz. Experiences are shaped by the conceptual, theological lenses of their traditions, so no pure experience speaks for all. 3. Cross-cultural conflict, Christian Trinitarian visions versus Advaita non-dual insight. And 4. Safety, reliability concerns given the ease of self-deception. Altered states and neuroscience, meditation research, neurotheology, and careful psychedelic trials suggest that certain practices and substances can occasion experiences of unity, timelessness, and profound meaning with long-term prosocial effects. Religious communities debate whether induced states are spiritually authentic, but their phenomenology overlaps with classical accounts. None of this settles metaphysics. Neural correlates do not by themselves explain whether the object of experience, God, Brahman, emptiness, is real. Social fruit and discernment. Traditions deploy criteria to distinguish authentic from spurious experiences. Stability of humility and compassion across Christian, Sufi, and Buddhist manuals, alignment with scripture or doctrine, Abrahamic faiths, and the counsel of mature practitioners. The pragmatic transformation of agents, courage in suffering, love of enemies, release from greed, has evidential weight for many. Further reading: William James, The Varieties of Religious Experience; Rudolf Otto, The Idea of the Holy; William P. Alston, Perceiving God; Stephen T. Katz, editor, Mysticism and Philosophical Analysis; Walter T. Stace, Mysticism and Philosophy; Ann Taves, Religious Experience Reconsidered; John Hick, Faith and Knowledge; Andrew Newberg and Mark Waldman, How God Changes Your Brain. 5. Miracles and Natural Law. Hume's Critique and Modern Defenses, Miracles as Violations versus Signs of Meaning. Hume's Challenge. In Of Miracles, Section X of the Inquiry, Hume defines a miracle as a violation of the laws of nature and argues that the evidence from uniform experience always outweighs testimony to violations. Since laws are established by firm, uniform experience, and testimony is often unreliable, credulity, zeal, ignorance, it is never rational to credit a miracle claim. Responses. Bayesian approaches contest Hume's always defeated stance. If the prior probability of a miracle is low but not zero, and the likelihood of the testimony given a genuine miracle is much higher than the likelihood of such testimony if no miracle occurred, repeated independent, highly reliable testimonies can raise the posterior probability above rational acceptance thresholds. Swinburne, Ehrman's sharp critique of Hume's probabilistic reasoning. What is a law? Many philosophers treat laws as idealized descriptions under ceteris paribus conditions, not exceptionless edicts. If God is part of the total causal story, special divine action need not be a violation but an additional causal factor at a higher explanatory level, non-interventionist causation. Some theologians propose that God acts through indeterminacies, quantum events, chaotic systems, or by sustaining and constraining the whole, not by jamming the gears. Miracles as signs. In biblical contexts, semaya, signs, are not magic tricks but symbolic events within a revelatory pattern, e.g., healings as foretaste of eschatological wholeness. Viewed thus, evidential force is intertwined with narrative meaning and the credibility of witnesses and communities. Cross-cultural claims. Hagiographies across Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism and Christianity record wonders, from bilocation to levitation to prophetic knowledge. Philosophically, the duplication of wonder claims across rival traditions can undercut apologetic deployment, or it can suggest that the sacred is not tradition monopolized, and that extraordinary events, where credible, support a general supernaturalism rather than a particular creed. Practical rationality. Given background beliefs, the same evidence can rationally lead different agents to different conclusions. Hume rightly warns against credulity, but a priori bar against miracles overreaches. Case-by-case assessment, considering independence of witnesses, medical records, disconfirmation efforts, and coherence with wider theistic commitments, better fits intellectual virtue. Further reading: David Hume, An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, Section X. John Earman, Hume's Abject Failure, The Argument Against Miracles. Richard Swinburne, The Concept of Miracle. C.S. Lewis, Miracles. Craig Keener, Miracles, The Credibility of the New Testament Accounts. Robert Lama, The Legitimacy of Miracle. N.T. Wright, Jesus and the Victory of God, Historical Method and Signs. Karol Zaleski and Philip Zaleski, The Book of Heaven, Visions Across Traditions. 6. The Problem of Evil. Theodicies, Augustinian, Irenaean process, suffering and meaning in different traditions. Defense versus theodicy. A defense shows it's logically possible that God and evil coexist. A theodicy tries to identify God's actual reasons. This section surveys major strategies without claiming any single one fully resolves all cases. Augustinian, privation and free will. Evil is a privation of good, not a co-eternal force. God creates free creatures whose misuse of freedom yields moral evil. Natural evils are tied to a fallen order. Strengths preserves divine goodness. Diagnoses moral agency. Weaknesses. Natural evil seems disproportionate to creaturely sin. Evolutionary history predates human moral agents. Inherited guilt is contested. Irenaean/Hick soul-making. We are created immature and are perfected through trials in a world fit for soul-making. Goods like courage, forgiveness, and compassion require difficult conditions. This shifts the focus from blame to formation. Strengths matches experiential growth narratives, allows eschatological fulfillment. Weaknesses, the extremity of some horrors, genocide, child suffering, seems excessive for any soul-making. Using others as instruments for my virtues raises justice worries. Process and open theism. Influenced by Whitehead and Hartshorne, process theists revise omnipotence. God lures creation toward value but cannot unilaterally override creaturely processes. Open theists maintain that some future free acts are not knowable as truths yet. Strength aligns with a dynamic, law-governed world, avoids the implication that God permits horrors he could deterministically stop. Weakness departs from classical theism. Some ask whether a non-omnipotent deity is worthy of worship. Comparative perspectives. Buddhism frames suffering, dukkha, as structurally built into craving and ignorance. The solution is not theodicy, but liberation through the Noble Eightfold Path. Hindu traditions often link suffering to karma, past actions, moral fruits, even across lives. This can underwrite moral seriousness, but risks victim blaming. Many teachers stress compassion over judgment. Judaism, after the Shoah, wrestles with protest theologies, e.g. Elie Wiesel's Night, and covenantal fidelity without tidy answers. Islamic thought affirms divine wisdom, hikmah, beyond human ken, and emphasizes patience, sabr, and trust, tawakkul, coupled with a strong duty to relieve suffering. Pastoral note. Philosophical answers and existential care are different tasks. In lament traditions, Psalms, Job, questioning God is part of faith. Any adequate account must preserve both the demand for justice and the injunction to mercy. Further reading: Augustine, Confessions and City of God, Evil as Privation. John Hick, Evil and the God of Love. Marilyn McCord Adams, Horrendous Evils and the Goodness of God. David Bentley Hart, The Doors of the Sea. Eleanor Stump, Wandering in Darkness, Narrative Theodicy. Whitehead, Process and Reality. Charles Hartshorne, Omnipotence and Other Theological Mistakes. Damien Keown, Buddhism, A Very Short Introduction, Dukkha, Elie Wiesel, Night, Witness Literature. 7. Free will, determinism, and divine providence. Human freedom versus divine omniscience. Compatibilist and libertarian perspectives. The dilemma. If God infallibly knows tomorrow that you will do X, can you do otherwise? If the physical world is deterministic, are we responsible? In Abrahamic traditions, God's providence orders history. In South Asian traditions, karma orders consequences. How any such ordering coexists with meaningful freedom is central. Compatibilism. Compatibilists hold that freedom is acting according to one's reasons and desires without external coercion, even if those desires are determined. Frankfurt cases challenge the principle of alternate possibilities, PAP. Moral responsibility may not require the ability to do otherwise if the agent acts from her own will. Consequence arguments, Van Inwagen, push back. If determinism is true, our acts follow from laws and past states we don't control. Hence, we are not free. Semi-compatibilists, Fisher, argue responsibility can survive even if alternative possibilities don't. Libertarianism. Libertarians insist on genuine indeterminacy at the point of choice. Some posit agent causation. Agents, not just events, originate actions. Critics ask how such causation is intelligible and how randomness avoids undermining control. Proponents reply that controlled, reasons-responsive indeterminism is coherent and matches moral intuition. Divine foreknowledge, Boethian timelessness. God is outside time. He knows our actions in an eternal now without causing them, so necessity of the past is not imposed. Ochimism. God's past beliefs are soft facts, dependent on future contingents. Changing the future would have changed the past belief counterfactually. Molinism. God has middle knowledge of counterfactuals of creaturely freedom, what any agent would freely do in any circumstance. By choosing to actualize a world with certain circumstances, God can providentially order free history. Critics question the grounding of such counterfactuals. Open theism. Future free acts are not yet truths to be known. God knows all that can be known and is supremely resourceful. Critics see this as limiting omniscience. Advocates argue it elevates relational mutuality, karma and freedom. Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain frameworks treat karmic causation as strong but not fatalistic. The Buddha compares karma to seeds whose fruition depends on conditions. Practice can alter trajectories. Jainism emphasizes radical responsibility, yet allows for ascetic practices that burn off karmic matter. Further reading, Augustine, On Free Choice of the Will, Boethius, Consolation of Philosophy, Book 5. Peter Van Inwagen, An Essay on Free Will. John Martin Fisher, The Metaphysics of Free Will. Robert Kane, editor. The Oxford Handbook of Free Will. Alfred J. Freddoso, editor. Molinism, The Contemporary Debate. William Hasker, God, Time and Knowledge, Open Theism. Mark Sideritz, Buddhism as Philosophy, Karma and Agency. Jonathan Ganeri, The Self, Naturalism, Consciousness, and the First-Person Stance, Indian Debates. 8. Science and Religion. Conflict, Independence, Dialogue, and Integration Models. Cosmology, Evolution, and Intelligent Design Debates. 4 Relations. Ian Barber proposed 1. Conflict, scientific naturalism versus biblical literalism. 2. Independence, separate magisteria, Gould's Noma, science, handles facts, religion values, meaning. 3. Dialogue, mutual clarification about method, language, and limits. 4. Integration, systematic syntheses, natural theology or theologies of nature. Most historians note that conflict as a master narrative is misleading. Medieval Islam and Christianity incubated science. Major scientists were religious. Yet conflict has flared where ecclesial authorities or fundamentalists made empirical claims contravened by evidence. Cosmology. Big Bang cosmology surprised many by positing a temporal origin. Some theists saw confirmation of creation ex nihilo. Others caution against God of the gaps. Fine-tuning, see Section 2, motivates renewed natural theology. Multiverse proposals pass it differently. The key is epistemic humility. Cosmology is data-constrained and theory-laden. Evolution. Common descent with natural selection is a bedrock of modern biology. Religious responses range from young Earth creationism, rejecting mainstream science, to intelligent design, accepting some evolution but inferring design in irreducible complexity or information, to theistic evolution, evolutionary creation. God creates through evolutionary processes. Many theologians read Genesis as theological cosmology rather than modern science. Jewish and Islamic scholarship historically integrated Aristotelian/Neoplatonic cosmologies with scriptural exegesis. Contemporary scholars do similar work with evolution, methodological versus metaphysical naturalism. Science operates with methodological naturalism, seek natural causes. Some move from that to metaphysical naturalism, only nature exists. Critics argue the move is not compelled by scientific method itself. Conversely, religious appeals must avoid premature supernatural insertions into scientific explanation. Human uniqueness. Debates on consciousness, rationality, morality, and religious sense explore whether these phenomena fit within evolutionary accounts. Some theists see the imago Dei realized through emergent capacities. Buddhists treat mind as dependently arisen and trainable. Confucians emphasize moral cultivation rather than radical ontological discontinuity. Further reading: Ian Barber, Religion and Science; Stephen J. Gould, Non-Overlapping Magisteria; John Polkinghorne, Theology in the Context of Science; Francis Collins, The Language of God; Michael B., Darwin's Black Box, Critics in; Robert Pennock, Editor, Intelligent Design Creationism and Its Critics; Philip Clayton, Adventures in the Spirit, Integration; Ted Peters and Martinez Hewlett, Evolution from Creation to New Creation; Peter Harrison, The Territories of Science and Religion, History. 9. The Nature of Ultimate Reality, Brahman, Śūnyatā, Tao. Comparative inquiry into being and emptiness. Ontological monism versus non-essentialist metaphysics. Brahman, Advaita, and alternatives. The Upaniṣads speak of Brahman as the ground of being and consciousness, that thou art, tat tvam asi. Shankara's Advaita Vedanta reads this as non-dualism. Atman, self, is Brahman, the world of plurality, is Maya, not sheer illusion but dependent appearance. Realization, jnana, dissolves ignorance and reveals pure consciousness. Alternatives include Ramanuja's Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-dualism, Brahman with real attributes, souls and world are modes of Brahman, and Madhva's Dvaita, dualism, eternal difference between God and souls. All hold Brahman as ontologically ultimate, but they disagree about the status of multiplicity. Śūnyatā, Madhyamaka. Nāgārjuna's analysis of dependent origination yields emptiness. All phenomena lack svabhava, inherent nature. Emptiness is not a new substance, but a way of seeing things as relational and conditioned. The two truths, conventional and ultimate, protect against nihilism. Ultimately, there's no fixed essence. Conventionally, there are persons, causes, and moral responsibilities. Realizing emptiness undercuts clinging and enables compassion because identities are porous and interdependent. The Tao De Jing opens. The Tao that can be spoken is not the constant Tao. Tao is the unnameable source and pattern of the 10,000 things. To live well is to align with its flow through wu-wei, effortless action, and ziran, spontaneity. The Tao is neither a personal creator nor a mere abstraction. It is the generative process that precedes being/non-being distinctions. Comparison. Brahmanic monism affirms an ultimate being or consciousness, often personal in devotional Vedanta. Madhyamaka denies any ultimate substance, offering instead an ultimate lack of essence that reveals the world's interdependence. Daoism gives an apophatic, processual source that is not a being among beings, closer to a way than a substance. Yet convergences appear. All three critique reification, emphasize contemplative transformation, and deploy apophatic language to avoid idolatry of concepts. Where Advaita prioritizes identity with the absolute, Madhyamaka cautions that any such posit risks reification. The ultimate is precisely the collapse of ultimizing. Further reading. The Upaniṣads, various translations. Shankara, Brahma Sutra Bhasya. Ramanuja, Shribhasya, Madhva, Anuvyakhyana. Nāgārjuna, Mula Madhyamaka Karika. Trans. J. Garfield, T.R.V. Murti, The Central Philosophy of Buddhism. Dao De Jing, Trans D.C. Lau, Ames and Hall, Zhuangzi. Elliot Deutsch, Advaita Vedanta, A Philosophical Reconstruction. Graham Priest, The Fifth Corner of Four, Logic and Emptiness. Chad Hansen, A Daoist Theory of Chinese Thought. 10. Self and No Self, Atman versus Anatman, Upanishadic Self-Realization versus Buddhist Denial of Enduring Self, Implications for Consciousness and Personal Identity. Atman. Upanishadic seers proclaim a deep self beyond body and mind, the witness consciousness that persists through waking, dream, and deep sleep. Knowing Atman as Brahman is liberation. Later, Vedantic debates refine whether the phenomenal ego, ahamkara, is illusory, whether the witness is identical to pure awareness, and how ignorance superimposes individuality on the non-dual self. Anatman. The Buddha rejects any permanent independent core. Persons are aggregates, skandhas. Form, feeling, perception, formations, consciousness, arising and ceasing in dependence. Clinging to a self breeds suffering. Insight into impermanence and non-self frees. Yet Buddhism maintains continuity through causal streams. Karma carries patterns without a persisting owner, like a flame passed from candle to candle. Debates and bridges. Classical Hindu-Buddhist controversies, e.g. Nyaya versus Buddhist logicians, turn on memory, responsibility, and liberation. If no self, who is reborn? Buddhism answers, a conventionally designated person constituted by relations. Not nothing, not a substance. Some Yogacara texts speak of alaya vijnana, storehouse consciousness that conserves karmic seeds. Critics worry this reifies a self in all but name. In modern analytic terms, Derek Parfit's reductionism about persons echoes Anatman. Identity is not a further fact beyond psychological physical continuity. Consciousness studies. Advaita sees consciousness as fundamental. Materialism cannot, on this view, explain the hard problem. Buddhist thinkers like the Abhidharma and contemporary mindfulness theorists analyze consciousness as momentary and conditioned, dissolving the hard problem by denying a unitary subject. Both traditions offer rigorous phenomenologies that can complement or critique neuroscience. Ethical upshot. If the self is ultimate, compassion arises from recognizing the same self in all. If the self is empty, compassion arises from recognizing interdependence and the arbitrariness of privileging me. Either way, the self is discentered and ethics becomes other-regarding. Further reading, Chandogya and Bradaranyaka Upaniṣads. S. Radhakrishnan, Indian Philosophy, Peter Harvey, The Selfless Mind. Mark Sideritz, Evan Thompson, and Dan Zahavi, editors. Self, No Self. Jonadon Ganeri, The Concealed Art of the Soul. Derek Parfit, Reasons and Persons. B. K. Matilal, Perception, an essay on classical Indian theories of knowledge. Evan Thompson, Waking, Dreaming, Being. 11. Time, Rebirth, and the Cyclic Universe. Cyclical Cosmology versus Linear Temporality. Philosophical Implications of Rebirth and Karmic Continuity. Temporal Imaginaries. Abrahamic traditions tend to imagine time as linear. Creation arrow, history arrow, judgment/new creation. South and East Asian traditions often imagine cycles, yugas, kalpas, universes expanding and contracting, beings coursing through samsara until liberation. Greek Stoics also entertained eternal recurrence. Nietzsche's existential thought experiment, would you will your life eternally repeated, tests life affirmation rather than cosmology, physics and metaphysics. Modern cosmology's standard model has a beginning in a hot, dense state. Alternative models propose bounces or cycles, echepyrotic scenarios, conformal cyclic cosmology. Philosophy of time distinguishes presentism, only the present exists, from eternalism, all times are equally real, the block universe. If eternalism is true, divine foreknowledge becomes easier. Presentism fits better with becoming and freedom. None of these positions is settled by physics alone. Philosophical commitments about causation and modality shape interpretations. Rebirth and identity. Rebirth raises the identity question, what makes a future person you? Hindu and Jain accounts posit a persisting self-subtle body. Buddhism denies this but retains karmic continuity. If memory is absent, is survival meaningful? Some argue moral continuity is enough. Others see eschatological justice, balancing of karma, as incoherent without a subject. Empirical investigations of putative past life memories are controversial. Philosophy of religion treats them at most as defeasible data points. Karmic order and responsibility. Rebirth stretches ethical horizons beyond one life, but contempt fatalism or victim blaming. Buddhist teachers stress the complexity of causes. Karma is only one condition among many. Compassion remains primary. Jainism emphasizes austere practices to purify karmic matter. Hindu texts balance karma with divine grace. Further reading, Wendy Doniger, editor, Hindu Myths, Gavin Flood, An Introduction to Hinduism, Bhikkhu Bodhi, trans, The Connected Discourses of the Buddha on Dependent Origination. Paul Dundas, The Jains, Sean Carroll, From Eternity to Here, Time's Arrow. Roger Penrose, Cycles of Time, Conformal Cyclic Cosmology. William Lane Craig and Quentin Smith, Theism, Atheism, and Big Bang Cosmology. Stephen Phillips, Classical Indian Metaphysics. Mark Johnston, Surviving Death. 12 Karma, Causality, and Moral Order. Karma as moral law versus mechanistic determinism. Buddhist dependent origination. Pratitya Samutpada, and its ethical significance. Karma as moral causation. Karma, action, and its fruits. Phala, express that intentional actions shape character and consequences within and across lives. Hindu and Jain thought often construes karma as a quasi-law. Jainism is striking in treating karma as subtle material particles adhering to the soul. Buddhism emphasizes intention, cetana, as the heart of karma. Mere outcomes don't fix moral valence, motives do. Determinism. Karmic law is not strict determinism. Many causes and conditions interact. Stored potentials, samskaras, bija seeds, ripen when conditions conspire. Practice, ethical discipline, meditation, wisdom can interrupt and transform patterns. This dynamism parallels contemporary accounts of habit formation and neuroplasticity, though the metaphysical frame is broader. Dependent origination. The Buddha's signature teaching links ignorance to formations to consciousness to name and form to aging and death. This is not a linear chain but a web of mutual conditioning showing how suffering arises and can cease. Because nothing has fixed essence, change is possible. Because phenomena are conditioned, responsibility is real. Emptiness, see section 9, deepens this. To see beings as relational engenders compassion and undermines egoic reactivity. Ethical implications. Karma motivates long-range accountability. It also encourages patience with oneself and others. No one is fixed by present states. Compassion, karuna, and loving-kindness, metta, are not mere sentiments but causal strategies. Cultivating them changes the karmic field. Socially, karmic thinking can support nonviolent reform. Gandhi drew on ahimsa and karma, but needs guarding against quietism in the face of injustice. Many modern teachers unite karma with structural analysis and activism. Further reading, Bhikkhu Bodhi in the Buddha's Words Anthology, Damien Keown, The Nature of Buddhist Ethics, Johannes Bronkhorst, Karma, Paul Williams, Mahayana Buddhism, Padmanabh, Jaini, The Jaina Path of Purification, Jonathan Ganeri, Attention Not Self, Charles Goodman, Consequences of Compassion, Maria Haim, The Forerunner of All Things, Buddhist Ethics. 13. Liberation and Enlightenment, Moksha and Nirvana. Philosophical accounts of liberation in Vedanta, Jainism, and Buddhism. Is liberation a metaphysical state, psychological transformation, or both? Vedanta. For Advaita, liberation, moksha, is knowledge, jnana, that the individual self is the non-dual Brahman. Bondage is avidya, ignorance, superimposing limitation on pure consciousness. Practices, ethical discipline, meditation, scriptural inquiry prepare the mind. Realization is instantaneous and classically irreversible. In Vishishtadvaita, liberation involves everlasting loving union with the personal God Vishnu. Divine grace cooperates with devotion and virtue. In Dvaita, the soul remains eternally distinct. Liberation is beatific vision and service. These nuances turn on how metaphysics, monism, qualified non-dualism, dualism, frames the self-God-world relation. Jainism. The soul, jiva, is intrinsically omniscient and blissful, but is weighed down by karmic matter. Through strict ethical vows, non-violence, truth, non-stealing, chastity, non-attachment, and asceticism, one burns off karmic accretions until achieving Kevala omniscience, and release from rebirth. Liberation is metaphysically precise. An unembodied soul rises to the apex of the universe. Buddhism. Nirvana is the extinguishing of greed, hatred, and delusion, the fires that sustain samsara. Early texts contrast nirvana with remainder while living, and without remainder at death. Mahayana elaborates bodhisattva ideals that postpone final nirvana out of compassion, and some traditions, e.g. Zen, Dzogchen, emphasize recognizing the already present Buddha nature. Metaphysically debates rage. Is nirvana a positive reality or simply the cessation of defilements? The mainstream insists it's unconditioned yet describable only negatively. Later schools treat it as inseparable from emptiness. Transformation. Metaphysical or psychological? The choices are not exclusive. Liberation entails metaphysical insight about self, reality or God, and psychological transformation, stable virtues and attentional clarity. Contemporary philosophy of mind and psychology illuminate mechanisms of transformation, habits, attention, affect regulation, while metaphysics guards against reducing soteriology to therapy. In all three traditions, liberation yields unselfish love. Further reading. Shankara, Vivekakudamani, Ramanuja Shribhasya, Paul Hacker and Wilhelm Halbfass, Essays on Vedanta, Padmanabh S. Jaini, Gender and Salvation, Jainism, Rupert Gethin, The Foundations of Buddhism, Stephen Collins, Nirvana and Other Buddhist Felicities, Sally B. King, Buddha Nature, Andrew Olensky, Untangling Self, John Powers, A Bull of a Man, Bodhisattva Ideal. 14. Ethics Without a Lawgiver, Buddhist Compassion, Karuna, Jain Ahimsa, and Confucian Virtue Ethics. Can moral order exist without divine command? Non-theistic moral frameworks. Buddhism grounds ethics in the causal structure of suffering and its cessation. Actions are good insofar as they conduce to the flourishing of self and others by reducing greed, hatred, and delusion. Compassion and wisdom are mutually reinforcing. The precepts function as skillful means, not edicts from a commander. Jainism elevates ahimsa, non-violence, to the summit of virtue, motivated by the conviction that all living beings possess souls and that violence binds karmic matter. Confucianism is a virtue ethics centered on ren, humaneness, cultivated through li, ritual propriety, within hierarchical relationships. Heaven, Tian, is sometimes personified, but often functions as an impersonal moral order discerned through the exemplary junzi, gentleman. Moral knowledge arises from tradition-guided cultivation, not divine fiat. Philosophical grounding. Moral normativity can be grounded in one human nature and flourishing, Aristotle, Confucians, I2. The structure of suffering and interdependence, Buddhists. 3. Rational requirements, Kant. 4. Social contracts. Or 5. Objective moral facts independent of God, robust moral realism. The Euthyphro dilemma pushes theists to clarify, are actions good because God commands them, risking arbitrariness? Or does God command them because they are good, implying an independent moral order? Modified divine command theories identify goodness with God's loving nature to avoid arbitrariness, while natural law theorists align morality with human flourishing designed by God. Non-theists argue that moral truths, if objective, can be brute or platonic. If not objective, a constructivist or contractualist account can still yield binding norms. Practical convergence. Despite metaphysical differences, many traditions converge on prohibitions, killing, lying, and virtues, compassion, honesty. Dialogue can thus focus on reasons and practices that sustain common goods, fostering civic friendship without metaphysical uniformity. Objections and replies. Without God, no ultimate accountability. Reply. Karmic and social orders can generate accountability. Secular legal orders and human conscience suffice for many. Without God, no motivation to be good. Reply, love of the good, compassion for suffering, and the intrinsic worth of persons, creatures are potent motives. Indeed, Buddhist and Confucian ethics mobilize them effectively. Moral progress. Religious and secular traditions both drive reform. Critique and self-correction are built into virtue traditions. Further reading, Peter Harvey, An Introduction to Buddhist Ethics. Charles Goodman, Consequences of Compassion. Paul Dundas, The Jains. Confucius, Analects, Translation. Ames and Rosemont. Rosalind Hursthouse, On Virtue Ethics. Eric Wielenberg, Robust Ethics. Robert Adams, Finite and Infinite Goods, Modified DCT. Alistair MacIntyre, After Virtue. 15. Artificial Intelligence and the Sacred. Framing the question. As machine learning systems permeate daily life, religions ask new and very old questions. What is a person? Can mind emerge from matter? What makes something worthy of moral concern? What happens to authority when algorithms generate or curate scripture-like texts? Does creativity or agency in artifacts invite sacralization or idolatry? Personhood and moral status. Most traditions tie personhood to capacities, rationality, self-consciousness, moral agency, relations, membership in covenant or lie-guided community, or metaphysical status, ensoulment, Atman. Current AI lacks consciousness and autonomous goals. It is a tool running statistical pattern recognition. If a system appeared to be conscious, passing advanced tests, we would still need criteria distinguishing simulation from sentience. Abrahamic views often link personhood to the imago Dei, image of God. Some theologians argue that image-bearing is relational and vocational, called to wise stewardship, not a substance. If so, AI cannot be in the image. Others allow that if genuinely self-aware artifacts ever arose, their moral status would be an open theological question. Buddhist views decenter substantial self. The criterion becomes capacity to suffer and to awaken. A machine that truly suffers would warrant compassion. But current systems do not have phenomenal consciousness. Attributing suffering is a category mistake. Confucian views stress ritual relations and virtue cultivation. Machines might be rites assistants that scaffold human flourishing, but are not ritual subjects. Authority and idolatry. Language models can generate sermons or sutra-style passages. Religious communities should ask, who is responsible for content? What biases are embedded? Authority arises from lineage, community recognition, and lived wisdom, not from predictive text. The risk is algorithmic oracleism, treating outputs as oracular because they are fluent. A healthy stance is instrumental and transparent. AI is a tool for study, translation, and administration, not a prophet. Sacred design and alignment. Traditions offer virtues for builders: humility, truthfulness, non-maleficence, justice, and compassion. Confucian Zhong, loyalty, and Shu, empathic reciprocity, translate into human-centered design. Buddhist Sati, mindfulness, counsels attention to downstream harm. Christian Caritas grounds dignity-preserving systems. Ahimsa, Jain nonviolence, pushes toward minimizing harm to sentient beings and the biosphere affected by compute-intensive training, ritual, and presence. Robots already perform limited ritual assistance, chanting, guiding prayer. Philosophically, symbols need not be conscious to mediate meaning. A cross is wood, yet sacramental. But when a robot simulates pastoral care, authenticity is at stake. Consolation without understanding risks cheapening grief. Communities can use AI to augment access, translations, scheduling, accessibility, while keeping human presence central. Eschatology and hubris. Apocalyptic anxieties about superintelligence mirror earlier fears of human overreach. Babel, Prometheus. Traditions counsel prudent hope. Technological gifts are ambivalent, demanding wisdom and limits. The sacred calls for reverence toward reality's givenness, not domination for its own sake. Speculative frontiers. If artificial consciousness ever emerged, still hypothetical, the moral landscape would shift. Hindu Vedanta could ask whether such minds manifest Brahman. Buddhists could treat them as sentient streams in need of compassion. Abrahamic faiths would debate whether God can bestow grace on non-biological persons. Until then, best practice is to avoid anthropomorphizing and to focus on present harms: bias, surveillance, labor exploitation, environmental cost, and goods, medical discovery, accessibility, education. Further reading: Alan Turing, Computing Machinery and Intelligence. John Searle, Minds, Brains and Programs, Chinese Room. Luciano Floridi, The Ethics of Information, The Fourth Revolution. Shannon Valor, Technology and the Virtues. David J. Gunkel, Robot Rights. Nick Bostrom, Superintelligence. Stuart Russell, Human Compatible. Noreen Hertzfeld, In Our Image, Artificial Intelligence and the Human Spirit. Brent Waters, From Human to Posthuman.
you.